I think people who don't know me are really quite surprised when they do meet me because I'm not, frothing at the mouth. Because some of my statements might be outrageous, but on a personal level, I'm kind of not. I'm kind of mild, I think. But I do take strong positions on these issues.
Have you taken a position where you really put yourself out there on the very edge?
Oh yeah.
Amy Agbayani came to Hawaii in the turbulent 1960s to get a graduate education, and she stayed to shake things up with her activist approach and sense of social justice. She has spent the past 40-plus years on campus and in the community, chipping away at the barriers holding back immigrants, women, gays, and other underrepresented groups. Her story is next on Long Story Short.
Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox is Hawaii's first weekly television program produced and broadcast in high definition.
Aloha mai kako, I'm Leslie Wilcox. In this edition of Long Story Short, we'll get to know Amy Agbayani, a Hawaii civil rights pioneer who's built a career and a reputation fighting for the underdog. Her activist roots date back to the anti-Vietnam War protests in the 60s at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Instead of returning to her native Philippines after graduate school, Dr. Agbayani found her calling in working to improve the lives of Filipino immigrants here in Hawaii. Over the years, she expanded her efforts to include other minorities and almost anyone on the fringes of society. Known as a tireless advocate, Amy Agbayani picks her battles and never gives up the fight.
I've always known you as Amy, but now I learned that that's not your legal name, it's a nickname. What's your real first name?
My father made it up, and it's Amifil, and it stands for America, Philippines. I was born during the war. Some people say which war, but I was born during World War II in Manila, and so the Philippines and America were working together. And so that's how I got my name.
Now, I believe your dad was a diplomat, wasn't he?
Right. My father actually was a journalist first and a faculty member, actually, and he was with the Philippine group right after the Philippines got independence to represent the Philippines as a diplomat. So he was the first crop of Filipinos to represent a new nation. And my father was assigned, his first assignment was to Sydney. And usually diplomats are allowed to stay a few years and then are asked to move on. But my father liked it, and we liked it, and it was good for our education, I guess. And so we stayed there for 9 years. So when I was growing up, and if you had talked to me on the telephone, I spoke like an Australian child.
And what did you speak at home?
We spoke English in our home, but because my mother and father speak 2 different Philippine languages.
One is Tagalog?
Right.
And what's the other one?
Ilocano, which is 80% of the Filipinos here in Hawaii speak Ilocano.
And you're still proficient in both languages?
Oh, no, I'm not. Yeah. I left the Philippines when I was 5, and so English is really the language that I'm most comfortable with.
And no more Australian accent?
No, I dropped that in about 2 minutes when I went back to the Philippines because everyone, would laugh at it.
And you lived other places too, right?
Yes, actually I graduated high school from Bangkok International School. It was a small, international school, and I think there were only 10 of us as seniors. And then I went to the University of the Philippines.
When you were growing up and living in some different countries and traveling too, was it hard to figure out who you were sometimes because there weren't other people like you right there?
I guess I didn't notice it. I thought I was Australian for a long time, And then, but then because of my parents and they had to represent our country, it was clear that I was Filipino. And so I wasn't confused about that, and I found it interesting, though, that with the exception of 2 or 3 friends, I really did grow up with non-Filipino classmates.
Amy Agbayani says she didn't experience racial discrimination thanks to her family's diplomatic and educational status. And as the 3rd child, her parents did not put undue pressure on her to excel.
Did your mother convey anything to you about about people who get left out of the best of society?
She was always kind and inclusive. So I think that's what I got from both of them, is that there's such a variety of people, and that there's so much talent out there. And so she made friends with everybody. So I just sort of copied her. She was sort of into United Nations all the time. She would dress me up in my Filipino uniform, and I'd be selling United Nations buttons downtown. You know, so I sort of had that international and multicultural sort of idea as a 5-year-old.
The Philippines is known as a country of haves and have-nots, so you're obviously a have.
My parents were haves, but through education rather than land or property. So my father and mother were very well educated.
And wanted you to be as well.
It was just assumed that we would be educated.
Did you get any direct advice from them on that?
Yes, I was supposed to be a doctor. I didn't enjoy that. My first ambition was to be a tennis professional, tennis star, because I grew up in Australia and tennis was the important sport there. But I learned early on that I wasn't going to survive or get hired as a tennis player. I was the alternate to the alternate on the tennis team. So I wasn't really one of the best tennis players. And so I think because of that, I sort of understood that I better pay attention to school. The next profession was to be a lawyer. And so that's where I got a degree in political science and planned to go to the University of the Philippines Law School, which is excellent. But really, there was a very long line for registration. So I decided to go across the street, which is the graduate school. And I was starting a master's in political science, and that's when I met a professor from the University of Hawaii visiting the Philippines, Bob Stouffer. And that's where I heard about the University of Hawaii and the East-West Center, and that's how I got to Hawaii as a East-West Center scholar.
What was said to you to get you so interested in giving up your plans and moving to another country?
Well, the scholarship. To the East-West Center and the University of Hawaii. I had no intention of staying in Hawaii. I was supposed to be an international foreign student and actually required to go back to the Philippines for 2 years. But I got married and stayed here, and those plans went out the door. But I had fully intended to go back to the Philippines and hopefully get a job at the University of the Philippines.
And then in Hawaii, you would become associated with a program that was for expressly Filipinos.
Yeah, I think it was interesting because I came to Hawaii in a way laterally, and it never occurred to me that Filipinos would be in such a disadvantaged position here. And so it was quite a shock when I learned about Hawaii's history and the situation of many Filipinos in Hawaii that, you know, it didn't seem right or fair. And so it was an easy transition for me to work in the community.
So you're at the East-West Center, and you do complete not only your master's, but you get a PhD. Mm-hmm. Where did that take you?
Well, I was 26 when I got my PhD, and my first job was to work in Kalihi, Palama on a model cities program. And then the 1965 immigration law was passed, and that brought along a lot of new immigrant Filipinos trickling into Hawaii. And so people like myself noticed that Filipino immigrants are really being picked on in the public schools. There was no bilingual education for them. They couldn't be understood, and there were big fights. And so a group of us started Operation Manong. But I think the reason we were able to do that is because most of us were highly educated. All of us, Sheila Foreman, Melinda Kirkleet, we were PhD candidates, and we had Howley last names, and with faculty husbands. And so I think we had a lot of self-confidence to just try anything out. And so we did start that, and it was really simple. We asked Filipino students, will you help tutor in the public schools, because the Filipino children need your help. And that week that we got there, we noticed there were Koreans and there were Chinese and others. And so we expanded Operation Manong from just Filipino to every immigrant community.
And this was a private nonprofit you started?
Well, we didn't even have any organization at the time. It was sort of just a group. And then later on, we got some church money, and then we were able to get a very large federal grant to hire our tutors to work in the public schools. And I'm extremely proud of the students that we got. The first two included Robin Campagnano and Amy Agbayani. Both of them represent, the kind of student that we wanted, who, is good at getting through college, but at the same time getting into a profession and being community-oriented.
I recall meeting you at that time. It was in the early 70s, and the immigrant Filipinos were being picked on by who but established Filipino kids.
Right. They wanted to distance themselves and not be considered at the bottom of the totem pole. So, they did fight with each other. And so that was one of the things that we had to work on, is to change the paradigm.
How long did it take for things to shift?
Well, we're still working on it. So every new generation, every new kid has to learn that. But at least we've won the argument, I think, that the schools must, and also the laws, and that's one of the reasons why I think I entered or participated in politics, is to change the laws. And civil rights laws are better now than they were then.
If you're interested in civil rights, it's pretty hard not to be politically minded if you want to get things done.
Right.
So you did enter politics.
And I helped lobby for the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission, and I was the first chair of the Civil Rights Commission.
Amy Agbayani's involvement in academic and activist circles led her to become acquainted with some of Hawaii's future democratic power brokers, relationships that continue to this day.
So many times you are when I see you covered by the press, or I see an announcement of some kind, you are the only Filipino person there. And during primary election night on live television, the wife of the candidate, Neil Abercrombie, was introducing you, and she said, she described you as this little Filipino woman.
Well, she sees me as a mentor, because I did introduce her to her husband, and actually got her to finish a college degree when she was a non-traditional student. And you're right that there are very few Filipinos in a lot of places, and that's one of the reasons why I am active in politics. It's because I think that that is a venue for Filipinos to improve their status in the state of Hawaii. And like Neil Abercrombie and I do go back a long way, and he is a strong friend of Ben Cayetano also. And so I used to ask Neil Abercrombie to help us on Filipino immigrant issues. So he would.
And so how did it come to be that you introduced Nancy Caraway to Neil Abercrombie, and they've been married for decades?
Well, she was a non-traditional student. She didn't have a BA. I, at the time, had already gotten a PhD. And she attended a workshop for women returning to college, and I suggested that she interview Neil Abercrombie for her term paper. And they got to meet each other, and that's history. And as I always tell everyone, I also helped them get their first apartment, which is even harder.
And did you see that happening? Did you see sparks? Or did you think that would happen?
No, I didn't. I didn't know Nancy that well either. She was one of the women that I was getting to know, and of course we have become good friends since then, but at the time I didn't know her that well.
In 2010, Amy Agbayani served as honorary co-chair for Neil Abercrombie's successful campaign for governor of Hawaii. He's one of the politicians she has identified with and supported in campaign after campaign.
Sometimes it's hard for me to picture you working in politics, just because there's so many aspects of it that you get your feet dirty sometimes, right? I mean, it's not a pleasant business some of the time because of the devil in the details and the stuff that you have to navigate.
Well, that's why I'm in politics and not I pick which things I will participate in. Some people think I should run for office. The only thing I do is run races, 10K or the marathon, but I didn't personally want to run for office, because then you have to do that 100%, whereas I pick and choose. And so, I support this candidate or that candidate, or I'm interested in this issue or that or another issue, but it's not 100%. By the way, I have not won every battle, you know, and I have supported people who have been beaten up and lost. For example, everyone thinks of Pat Siminka only the successes she's had, but I've helped I helped Pat Siminka when she lost 3-1, I think, against Sparky Matsunaga. You know, so I've been on the losing side on a number of issues, but I keep coming back to the legislature.
So when people read a position you've taken, it comes across strong and wow, and then when they meet you, you're mild-mannered.
Well, I think I actually played a special role in Hawaii politics, and that is that I'm on the streets with my demonstrating on some issue, but at the same time I have developed access to insiders in the legislature and even in corporate business to try and make sure that we have access to those resources too. We're knocking at the door oftentimes, and so I do try to have friends on the other side or people who are decision making, because most of the groups that I am supporting are not at the table.
So you need to know people who have power to partner with those who...
And some of the young students, they call me Manang, Amy, they think that I've always had access. I said, hey, no. You know, I couldn't even get to talk to the superintendent of public schools before when I was working in Operation Manong. He wouldn't answer my phone calls. So we actually, one of the things we did is we'd have press conferences, and he would say, who is that? You know, I'm trying to I said I wouldn't have had this press conference if you had answered my phone call.
You are still, in a sense, the head of OM, which used to stand for Operation Manong, but now it stands for the Office of Multicultural
Student Services. And that's just one of many programs that I have at the University of Hawaii. I made up the office name. It's called SEED, Student Equity, Excellence, and Diversity. And I sort of say you can't have one without the other. You can't have excellence unless you also pay attention, or you should pay attention, to diversity and inclusiveness and equity.
At the time of this conversation in 2010, Amy Agbayani oversees more than 20 programs addressing the needs of students from underrepresented groups in terms of age, academic ability, ethnicity, disability, economic class, culture, gender, race, religion, and sexual orientation.
This group is just like any other support services I have for Hawaiians or Filipinos. We try to make sure that they get through college, that they know how to navigate the university system, that they feel comfortable, and that they are encouraged to, you know, fully participate in student government or make presentations about their issues. So we have one program like that, and we're one of the few in the country that has a tenured faculty member assisting gay and lesbian students. My whole program, by the way, used to be threatened all the time. For example, when there would be a 1% budget cut at the university, my program would be identified for a 100% cut. Me, ethnic studies, women's studies, they would line us out. I said, excuse me. But now at least we're on par with physics and math and geography and so forth. And so that when they do come to deciding or allocating budgets, we hold our own, because we can point to their strategic plan. It's included in that strategic plan. But we just have to make sure that we keep advocating, and that the leadership understands it really is to the self-interest of the University of Hawaii to have diversity.
So are you the go-to person on campus and maybe well outside campus when there's an issue involving somebody's rights being marginalized or disrespected?
Oftentimes, I think the newest civil rights battle is the same gender and civil unions battle for equality, and I'm very active in that. And some people wonder why I'm so active in it. And actually, for me, it's just a no-brainer. I mean, I didn't even think about, oh, should I do this or should I participate in that? I said, it's so clear, and it's like breathing, that you would see that as unequal and unfair.
Are you not getting married out of a wish to support civil unions? If they don't get that, then I'm going to, you know, the Brad Pitt line?
I was married before to my professor, Bob Cahill. Some people may know him. He was very progressive, liberal, and he got me involved in my first campaign for Tom Gill, who ran for lieutenant governor. I have a partner. His name is Gus Gustafson. He's Howley, Swedish-American, I think, from Boston, and he's retired from the Department of Health. And he likes to run also, and he, I guess the first week he retired, he got addicted to golf. I was married before, and I thought that, you know, a relationship should be, well, you should be there if you want to be there, and that, and so
well,
Gus
working.
and I have been together now for over 35 years. We live in Kalihi Valley. It's a wonderful place. We live in a small plantation home. I think it's about 650 square feet, but we have very large land, and we have bananas and hundreds of heliconia.
Why did you pick Kalihi Valley?
Oh, well, we could afford it, but, and you know, lots of Filipinos there. Every house with a malunggay tree, we call that the Filipino flag. And I work in Kalihi a lot with the community, Kalihi Waipahu. I also have programs for Native Hawaiians in Waianae and Nanukuli, so I'm not just in Kalihi, but it's a nice location, and as I pointed out, I graduated from Bangkok International School, and everyone assumes I graduated from Farrington High School, so I tell everyone I'm a Farrington High School wannabe, and I have purchased Farrington High School alumni shirt, and I think that's a great school, and I have programs there too. It's 60% Filipino in Farrington High School.
Amy Agbayani worries about what happens to those students after high school because too many do not go on to college.
Filipinos are severely underrepresented at the University of Hawaii, and that's one of the areas I work on. We're 23% at the public schools, and we're only less than 10% at Manoa, and we're less than 2% on the faculty. And so we're also underrepresented in corporate boards, and we're underrepresented in many areas. So we're trying to change that. And we're well represented, by the way, politically. For example, in City Council, 3 out of 9 of the council members are of Filipino ancestry. And as you know, we have the first Filipino-American governor in the United States with Ben Cayetano. And we were actually well represented in politics. So I see education, politics, media, you know, the culture and the arts. We have to make a dent in each of these areas. We're doing well, by the way, I think, with the unions. We have good leadership of Filipino leadership in the unions. So we are a majority in the Hotel Workers Union, Local 5. I did get arrested just a couple of months ago, by the way. I joined the protest for Local 5 in Waikiki. We actually prepared to get arrested, and you know, so that we would know how to handle ourselves. And it was actually just civil disobedience to make a point that the workers should be given a fair contract. One of my criticism of the previous mayor was in his first term, there were no Filipinos in the cabinet. That's just totally unacceptable. My criticism of Governor Lingle, which was in the newspaper recently, was she has 1 woman on the Board of Regents out of 15. And then her nominees previously to the bar, from the bar to the judgeship, there were no women. In this day and age, you sort of say, duh. You know, it's sort of a non-brainer. And you don't have to convince people just because it's fair, but it's because you actually get better decisions that way if you utilize more the talents out there.
Did I hear you say a while back that innovation and excellence, those come together?
Yeah, and diversity. You know, the person who's going to solve cancer for Hawaii might be this little child in Molokai. Well, we have to make sure that the children in Molokai get educated, have access to higher education, and become our scientists and our leaders. So to me, it's sort of a self-serving, and to everyone's self-interest to really reach out and try and include people, because of that's the reality. Diversity is the reality. What we have to do is include that diversity.
What kind of a shift in public opinion in Hawaii have you seen since the 70s?
A lot, and I'm an eternal optimist, and the best is yet to come.
What is it about you that allows that optimism to flow even when you've been defeated multiple times?
Yeah, I figured out that, as I said, you don't have to be very brainy oftentimes. You have to be there. So persistence is much more important, I think, than intelligence or being articulate. Like, you don't want me? Well, I'll be here tomorrow.
Amy Agbayani intends to be a voice for fairness and justice in Hawaii's academic, legislative, and political arenas, not only tomorrow, but the day after that, and in the weeks and years to come. Even after she retires from her job at the UH, Dr. Agbayani has no plans to abandon her life's work, plugging away for the people and causes she cares about. Mahalo to Amy Agbayani for sharing her long story short, and mahalo to you for tuning in. I'm Leslie Wilcox. Ahui ho ka ho. Until next time, aloha.
For audio and written transcripts of this program and all episodes of Long Story Short with Leslie Wilcox, visit pbshawaii.org.
I think it takes a sort of a fire to continue to do what you do. What keeps it burning?
Actually, I make no boundaries, in a sense, between my work and my community work or my professional career or whatever. So it's just an interest to me, and I identify with those things, and I guess I get rewarded for doing these things. So it's not really hard for me to do this thing.